So chapter 10 tackles the prepositions, and prepositions are intended as clarifiers. Stevens here writes that they are intended to clarify the objective cases. So those are the cases other than the nominative. And it makes sense because the interior cases, the genitive and the dative in particular, we know them as building prepositional phrases. We said of or from or in, by, with. So we're used to that. But prepositions, if you use those in a sentence, further clarify the direction of the objective causes. So let's give an example of that because it helps us further translate what's going on here. Because prepositions, as we have studied them thus far in the vocabulary, can be translated variably depending on case usage. So the key here really is to combine the preposition with the case in which it is presented. So if you have the preposition dia, for example, in combination with a noun that is in the genitive case, you would translate it as through. And it can be through in terms of an adverbial of place, or through as human agency, or through as instrumental means. But if dia is given with a noun in the case of the accusative, we translate it as because of. So a causality is given there. Again, we also see this, for example, when we go to the word AP. If it's given in a combination in a sentence with the genitive, we can translate it upon or during, depending on whether or not we deal with an adverbial of place or adverbial of time. And that will become clear from the context. But if it is given in conjunction with the dative, well, then we translate AP as to or for, kind of in a classical sense of an indirect object, or with respect to, almost a little bit genitival, as in the sense of reference, or on or at or in, even because of in a sense of instrumentality or by. And if it's even in the accusative, then it's an adverbial of measurement. So then we say upon. So you see there's a lot of different variation there. Now, Stevens talks about case usage and how it can be diverse, but we have two what he calls one case functions, and they are bolded here: ana, anti, apo, heis, hec, pro, and soon. And those all are one case prepositions, so you find them in one case only. Also notice here that you see sub cases here. So not only do we have the genitive, but we have the genitive and the ablative. And not only do we have the dative, but we also have the locative and the instrumental. And so those are subdivisions. And if you recall, we have talked way at the beginning when we introduced Greek about an 8-case system that the classics used. And if you add the accusative and the nominative to this, you pretty much get to the 8-case system there. If we add all of them up here together, so know that. And then you see that this is true for a variety of prepositions, that they have multiplicity of uses, multiple uses. Always note the case of the noun constructed with a preposition to narrow your options for translation. And after that, if you're still not narrowed down sufficiently, look at the context. Okay, so remember that all of this fits in our word groups, and that we figure out how all of this works together, including a prepositional phrase. Now, something else in this chapter that we discuss are compound verbs. And the reason we discuss this is because somewhere in that verb's history, a preposition met a verb. And we know this in English as well, Stevens points out, like overcharge, uphold, withstand. Notice that over, up, and with are all prepositions. So Greek knows that as well. We have gnosko, and then we have epignosko. I know and I know fully. Though later on, Stevens points out, you know, some of that kind of waters down, and over time, even epiginosko could just mean gnosko. We have balo and we have ekbalo. I throw and I throw out. Or gnosko, meaning I know, and anagnosko, more as I read. Okay, so we have all sorts of different components there, and it's important for you to be able to recognize that something is a compound verb, because in the future, when you will deal with past tense verbs, we will have some sort of forms there, kind of like an inflection, but in the middle, where we find little epsilons between the preposition and the verb, and you will need to develop an eye for spotting those. Well, prepositions also can change spelling depending on what noun is following it. And that depends on whether or not the noun following starts with smooth breathing or rough breathing. And so that goes back to our square of stops. And here you see an overview of what those spelling variations look like. Notice that our prepositions end with, mostly end with vowels. Of course, we have prepositions like soon. But in the case it ends with a vowel, and then another word follows that starts with a vowel, we'll drop a vowel. And we see that here represented, elision. And then if it's followed by a rough vowel, then you'll see in that second column there that we have something we call aspiration. We see that it kind of retreats back. So if you remember the square of stops in chapter 1, if you had a tau like an auntie and you meet the next rough breathing in the following vowel, you will lose your iota there, and then the tau aspirates to a theta, the pi aspirates to a phi, and so on. Now of course in dia nothing happens there, because you drop one vowel only to expose another one, and all those reactions simply have everything to do with pronunciation. Changes also occur in compound verbs, because when apo meets ago, it drops the omicron, and when it blurs together, you get apago. Same for dia and erkomai, in ek and ergomai. Now ek, you see, does not aspirate to a key. Rather, if you remember from your vocabulary in chapter 2, it opts for X. And we learned that as a vocabulary form. Okay, so, oops, we lost a spot here. So going back here to chapter 10 then, we have seen the different spellings that it takes. And we know that we have what we call one-hit wonders, those 7 with just one particular translation option because it has one case associated with it. We see several different examples, and just take a look at that. And so you see that the particular exercises in this chapter aim at the spelling changes and at you being able to recognize compound verbs.